Welcome to What's a Preacher to Do? Must Reads. I'm Alice McKenzie, and this is a series of brief interviews with authors of recent books in homiletics to encourage preachers in our ongoing reading and growth. Today, my guest is my friend and colleague, Reverend Dr. Nancy Lammers Gross. She is the Arthur Sarell Rudd Professor of Speech Communication in Ministry at Princeton Theological Seminary. And her areas of teaching interest include speech communication, preaching, especially the preaching of the Apostle Paul, and worship. She's an ordained Presbyterian minister, and she served several churches in California and New Jersey. And she's active in the preparation for ministry of candidates in her New Brunswick Presbytery. She enjoys being involved in children's ministries in local congregations, which I did not know, Dr. Lammers Gross. She is the author of If You Cannot Preach Like Paul, and more recently, Women's Voices and the Practice of Preaching, published in 2017 by William Erdman's Publishing Company. And that is going to be our focus for our interview today. So thanks for being with us. Today, we're going to look, as I said, at women's preaching, Women's Voices. The book explores the reality of voice for women preachers and how we struggle with it, what it is, how we struggle to claim it, how we lose it, and how in the book we can reclaim it through renewed vocational confidence and specific, very practical exercises. So thanks for being with us. And you've spent over 25 years teaching, preaching, working with women struggling to employ their voices in the proclamation of the word. So maybe we jump in by asking how do you define voice?
Well, Alice, thank you for inviting me to do this. This is a lot of fun, and it's fun to see you in this context and to have this conversation. Thanks. In the book, the primary definition of voice is the literal speaking voice, the audible speaking voice that you're hearing coming from my body right now. We tend to think of voice more metaphorically. Right. So women's voices have been stifled in terms of hearing their perspective, women's points of view, women's experiences in life, and how women interpret scripture, how they interpret life's experiences. That's the metaphorical voice.
Right.
That can be expressed in writing, the metaphorical voice. But the voice I'm talking about, I use a lowercase v to designate it in the book. The physical, literal, audible speaking voice that's produced by your physical body is the lowercase v voice, and that's the voice I'm talking about in the book.
Right, and you wanted that on the cover, is that right?
I actually wanted the lowercase v on the cover, and the publisher said it messes up cataloging and computer systems, and it just confuses everything electronic in the world, so we had to put it in the uppercase v.
Right. Yeah. So how do they get disconnected? The capital V, the small v?
Yes. I highlight 3 reasons in my book, and they come directly out of my teaching experience. So I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a sociologist of religion, but there have been 3 primary reasons in my experience teaching, preaching, and speech that women seem to be disconnected from their physical speaking voices. And those are the 3 reasons I highlight in the book. One of them I call body wars. And I think every woman in the world is probably familiar with this. I say every woman in the world, certainly in Western culture. Right. And the expectations of what the good body looks like, the good physical body looks like. What I came to learn very quickly is that it doesn't matter if you have the body that the culture thinks is good. Internally, we have received so many messages about what the good body looks like that very few believe they have it. So I call it body wars, and actually review the 20th century perspectives of what the good body looks like.
Right.
So if you were born 60 years ago, you might have the perfect body. But if you were born in the 60s, that's a very different perfect body.
Like Twiggy, right?
Twiggy.
Right.
Twiggy. At the beginning of the century, it was more fulsome.
Right.
Post-World War II, think buxom.
Right.
Now think 1960s, and you're at Twiggy.
Right.
Now move ahead into, the exercise culture, and muscular is acceptable. I was actually invited by a trainer at a gym where I exercised. We didn't even have the workout language back then,
Right.
but I exercised in this gym. I was invited by a trainer. He wanted to train me because he saw me lifting weights on the machines. I didn't know anything about free weights, but you went and did weights on the machines, and I was horrified. Now, I was a minister then. I was a local ordained Presbyterian minister. And I didn't know enough about my own body to know that if he did train me, I wouldn't become bulked up.
Right.
And the last thing in the world I needed was to look bulked up. And now I see the opportunity that I missed to have someone physically train me so that I would have, you know, a better sense of how my own body worked.
Right.
So, you know, that was an enemy back then. Now, people would, you know, they jump at it, right? Not to have to pay for that.
Right.
So yes, the good body changes over the decades, and within cultures, it changes, and within subcultures, it changes. So we could move to another country, perhaps in another hemisphere, and have the perfect body, or the one that, you know, if you have a full body like my own, it's an indication that your family can take care of you, or maybe that your husband can provide for you. Whereas to be so thin as to look emaciated would be an indication maybe that your family doesn't have the resources to take care of you. So depending on where you go, it's very different.
So we internalize these cultural norms for the perfect body, and then if it's not the cultural goal or norm, then we lose confidence in our capital V voice. Is that?
We lose confidence in our small, well, in the capital V voice, but we can't even use our lowercase v voice.
Right.
What we do is we disconnect from the body because it's not good.
Right. Right.
So if we're larger than we think we should be, we shrink. Right. If we're small, we think, you know, we've still been taught maybe to use a high-pitched voice. We don't learn, right, to stand with confidence and to to fill out our space, to embody our space. We learn, a second reason that I highlight is gender norms. So that we learn as we're growing up. This has been studied extensively, of course, in the realm of education, boys being called on more frequently than girls, girls losing confidence in their own answers, and so they back up, they use small voices, or from a very early age, one of my daughters came home from preschool saying she had to be, I don't know, the yellow Power Ranger that day when she wanted to be the pink Power Ranger. And I said, well, why couldn't you be the yellow Power Ranger? Well, because Johnny told me I had to be the pink Power Ranger. Well, why does Johnny get to decide? Mom, he's a boy.
Wow. Yeah.
She was maybe 4 years old.
Right.
Now, he did not get that message in my house.
No. And what's the third reason then?
And then the third reason is abuse. That so many women have experienced some form of physical abuse, and maybe emotional abuse has done the same thing. Physical abuse, sexual abuse, so the body is not a safe place.
Oh, yes.
So why would I want to embody my voice when I have to be disconnected from my body just to be safe?
Right. So what are one or two ways that you help women recover their voice as a full body instrument?
Right.
Because the book is very practical.
It is. And what I say is the voice is a full body instrument. It's a musical instrument. One of the things I do with my speech classes is to take a classic wooden music box that has the drum with the pins on it, and then the needles that strike the pins and create the sound, right? And the wood box is the resonator. Just like in a piano, the wood frame, everything in the piano is a resonator. And I wind it up. It's completely mechanical. I wind it up and hold it up in the air. Just hold it up here and play it. And you get a nice sound, but it's rather tinny and it's rather small. And then I place it on the wood desk, and the wood desk acts as a resonator. The wood box is resonating against the desk, and you get this much bigger, fuller sound. So there's a classic example of a musical instrument that has to be grounded and that has to use all the resonating space that it has, and that the full body instrument starts at the bottom of our feet and goes all the way up to the top of our heads. So when we're tense and we stand with our feet and our knees together and our hips tense, we've cut off the lower half of our body. If we're tense up here and we're just speaking from our throat and our head, we've cut off even our torso. And now we have this tight voice. Sometimes I can see it in the students. Can you see the strain in my neck right now? You know, where you can see everything straining here because it's not relaxed, and so they can't use the full body. But for all these reasons that the body is either not safe, or it's not good, or it's not good enough, or just being female is a problem. Or now, and I've said if I wrote this book today, or it was being nurtured today rather than 25, 30 years ago, I'd be talking more about gender issues as well. Right. And not just, it's quite binary, but it has to do with the time that it came from, even though it wasn't published until 2017. Nevertheless, to re-engage our bodies is a difficult thing to learn.
Exactly. Well, your book is such a great benefit to us in that struggle. Is there a message in it for men as well as women?
Absolutely. And I start off at the very beginning and say, there's nothing you can say about women that you can say about all women and not some men. And there's nothing you can say about men that you can say about all men and not some women. And now when we think about gender more on a spectrum, now you can't say anything about anybody and think that you're speaking for a whole group, right? So it really has to do with these experiences. I had a very tall, slender man once who I thought, in terms of, the culture, he was a beautiful young man. This was 25 years ago. And he had a disconnected voice. I could not figure it out. And when I said something to him about it, he got very angry with me. It was an early lesson, and said, you have no idea what it's like to be 6 feet tall in 6th grade. Wow. So he was so shamed by his peer group for being so, how's the weather up there? And you look like a tween. Imagine all those things. So that, sure, when he's 18 and he's 6 feet tall, he's relatively average. But in 6th grade, it was horrible. And he was formed by that. So he's disconnected from his body. Yeah. So the message is really to everybody. Women aren't the only ones who suffer abuse. Now we know that gender norms don't have to do with just binary male, female. Now we know that the good body stretches across all manner of gendered spectrums, cultural spectrums. So it's really easy to get the message that maybe the better way is just to disconnect from my body. Right. Well, your book is a great help in preventing that for both, for all the spectrum of our gender orientation. So thank you so much for being our guest today. And viewers, check out our website. You can see more about Dr. Lammers Gross' work and her bio. And until next time, thanks. Thank you.